Three
I
days
love this
later,
time with you.
the real world finally found us. It was a Tuesday afternoon.
Me
The rain
too.
had stopped, but the sky was still a bruised purple. I was sitting on the floor in the living room, sorting through Clara's old vinyl collection. She was reading in the armchair, her legs tucked under her. We hadn't turned the TV on. I hadn't turned my phone on. We existed in a bubble of coffee, music, and the kind of heavy, charged silence that happens when two people are circling each other, waiting for the inevitable. Then gravel crunched in the driveway. Tires squealed. A car door slammed. Clara looked up from her book. Her expression tightened. She knew that sound. It wasn't a neighbor dropping off cookies. It was an invasion. "I'll handle it," she said, putting her book down and starting to stand up. The instinct to protect the neighbor's kid was still there. "No," I said. I stood up. I didn't rush. I brushed the dust off my jeans. "Sit down, Clara," I said gently. "I'll get it." She hesitated, looking at me. She saw something in my face, a calmness that hadn't been there 3 days ago. She slowly sank back into the chair. I walked to the front door just as the fist hammered against it. I opened it. Arthur was standing there. My agent. He was wearing a trench coat that cost more than most cars, and he looked furious. He was red-faced, holding a cell phone like a weapon. "Leo," he shouted, pushing past me into the entryway before I could stop him. "Do you have any idea the hell I have been in for the last 72 hours? The Philharmonic is threatening to sue. The press is speculating you had a drug overdose. And I find you playing house in wherever the hell this is?" He looked around the cozy, dim entryway with a sneer. "Arthur," I said. My voice was low. "Keep your voice down." Arthur ignored me. He spotted Clara in the living room. "And who is this?" He marched toward the living room archway. "Is this why you blew up your career? Some local distraction?" Clara stood up then. She crossed her arms, her chin lifting. She looked regal, even in her oversized sweater. She opened her mouth to speak, to defend me, to defend herself. But I moved faster. I stepped between Arthur and Clara. I didn't touch him. I just occupied the space. I was taller than him, something he usually made me forget. Today, I remembered. "Don't," I said. The word was hard, like a chord struck in the bass register. Arthur blinked, stepping back. He looked up at me, surprised. He was used to the Leo who apologized, the Leo who asked for permission to take a break. "Excuse me?" Arthur sputtered. "Leo, pack your bag. The car is running. If we leave now, we can spin this as a mental health retreat and save the European tour." "I'm not going to Europe, Arthur," I said. "What?" "I'm not going back," I said. "Not to the tour, not to the schedule, and definitely not to you." Arthur laughed, a harsh, incredulous sound. "Don't be dramatic. You're a prodigy. You don't get to just quit. You belong to the public, Leo. You belong to the stage." "I belong to myself," I corrected. "And right now, I'm staying here." Arthur's eyes narrowed. He looked over my shoulder at Clara. He gave her a look of pure contempt, a look that reduced her to nothing more than an aging woman taking advantage of a confused young star. "I see," Arthur sneered. "Does she know you're having a breakdown? Or does she just like the idea of having a pet project?" I felt the anger flare hot and white, but I didn't shout. I took one step forward, forcing Arthur to retreat toward the door. "You're going to leave," I said, "now. And if you ever speak to her or look at her like that again, you and I are going to have a very different kind of conversation." Arthur stared at me. He looked for the nervous kid he'd managed for 8 years. He didn't find him. He found a man standing in his own home, defending the woman he loved. Arthur scoffed, adjusting his coat. "Fine, throw it away. But when you wake up and realize you've ruined your life for a quiet weekend in the suburbs, Don't call me. I won't, I said. I opened the door. Goodbye, Arthur. He stormed out. The engine roared. Tires spun on the wet pavement, and then he was gone. I shut the door. I threw the deadbolt. The silence rushed back in. I stood there for a second, breathing in the scent of the house. I felt lighter. 10 years of weight. Gone. Leo? Clara's voice was soft. I turned around. She was standing by the bookshelf. She was looking at me with wide, stunned eyes. She had seen me play Rachmaninoff to a standing ovation, but she looked more impressed now than she ever had then. You fired him, she whispered. I fired him, I agreed. He said you'd ruin your life. I walked over to her. I didn't stop until I was right in front of her. My life was already ruined, Clara, I said. I'm just starting to fix it. She looked up at me. There was a vulnerability in her eyes I hadn't seen before. She wasn't the mentor now. She wasn't the older neighbor. She was just a woman looking at a man who had chosen her over the world. You really aren't going back? She asked, her voice trembling slightly. I'm exactly where I want to be, I said. I reached out and cupped her face. Her skin was warm. She leaned into my hand, closing her eyes for a second, letting out a breath she must have been holding since Arthur walked in. Okay, she whispered, opening her eyes. A slow, adoring smile spread across her face. Not playful this time, but deep and relieved. Okay. Besides, I murmured, brushing my thumb over her cheekbone. I still haven't fixed your piano. She laughed, a wet, shaky sound. She wrapped her arms around my waist, burying her face in my chest. I held her tight, listening to the rain start up again outside, knowing that for the first time in my life, I wasn't performing for anyone. I was just home. I didn't want to come back. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. The rain was hammering against the windshield of my old pickup, blurring the familiar streets of the town I ran away from 10 years ago. I was 28 now. I wasn't the skinny, angry kid who used to do burnouts in the high school parking lot. I had filled out. I had scars on my hands and ink on my arms. I had spent a decade trying to outrun my reputation, but looking at these streets, I felt that heavy, suffocating weight settle right back in my chest. Just passing through, I told myself. Get gas, get coffee, keep driving. Then the engine sputtered. No, I growled, tapping the dashboard. Don't do this, not here. The truck didn't listen. It gave one last pathetic cough and died. The headlights flickered and went out, plunging me into darkness. I coasted to a stop against the curb. The silence inside the cab was deafening, broken only by the relentless drumming of the storm. I looked out the window to see where I had landed. My stomach dropped. I knew this house. It was the only house on the street that used to have flowers in the front yard, even when the rest of the neighborhood was dying. It was the house where the lady used to sit on the porch swing and wave at me, even when the cops were at my door next door. Evelyn's house? I stared at the warm yellow light glowing from the front window. It looked like a beacon in the gray night. I shouldn't knock. I should sleep in the truck and call a tow in the morning. I was soaking wet, tired, and I looked like trouble. People like me didn't knock on doors like that. But I was freezing. And honestly, I was lonely. I pulled my hood up and stepped out into the rain. Ideally, I would have run to the porch, but my boots felt heavy, like lead. I walked up the path. The wooden steps creaked. I remembered that sound. I raised my hand and knocked. 3 sharp raps. I waited, half hoping no one was home. The inner door opened. Then the screen door pushed out. Evelyn stood there. She was 46 now, but she had the same soft eyes I remembered. She was wearing a thick knitted cardigan wrapped around her, holding a book in one hand. She looked cozy. Safe. She squinted at me through the rain. I knew what she saw. A looming shape, a stranger in a leather jacket, dripping water on her welcome mat. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice cautious. I cleared my throat. "My truck died," I said, pointing a thumb over my shoulder. "I'm sorry to bother you, ma'am. I need to call a tow." She froze. She tilted her head, looking past the beard, past the wet hair, looking right at my eyes. Her expression changed. The caution melted away, replaced by a shock that quickly turned into a smile, a warm, genuine smile that hit me harder than the cold. "Lucas," she whispered. I flinched. I hadn't heard my name spoken like that, without anger or suspicion, in a long time. "Yeah," I mumbled, looking down at my boots. "It's me, Evelyn." She laughed. It was a happy sound. She pushed the door open wide. "My God, look at you," she said. "You're huge and you're drowning. Get in here." "I'm wet," I warned. "I'll ruin your rug." "It's just a rug, Lucas," she said, reaching out. She grabbed the sleeve of my wet jacket and pulled me gently inside. "Get in before you catch pneumonia." I stepped over the threshold. The house smelled like cinnamon and old wood. It smelled like the cookies she used to sneak me when my dad locked me out. She shut the door against the storm. The quiet wrapped around us. She turned to face me, her eyes sweeping over my face, reading the history written there. She didn't look scared. She looked glad. "I thought you were gone for good," she said softly. "I was," I said, my voice rough. "I was just passing through." "Well," she smiled, that playful, adoring smile returning. "Fate had other plans. Take off that wet coat. I'll put the kettle on." I stood there dripping on her hardwood floor, watching her walk to the kitchen. For 10 years, I had felt like a stray dog. But standing in Evelyn's hallway, I felt something I hadn't expected. I felt like I'd finally stopped running. I peeled off my leather jacket. It was heavy with water, dripping onto the hardwood. I felt like a bull in a china shop. Too big, too dirty, too rough for a place this clean and soft. I hung the jacket on the coat rack, hoping it wouldn't warp the wood. Underneath, my gray t-shirt was plastered to my skin, showing the ink that covered my arms from wrist to shoulder. Skulls, roses, engines. A map of bad decisions and long nights. I walked into the kitchen. Evelyn was standing by the stove. The kettle was beginning to whistle. She reached up to a high cupboard, stretching to grab a mug. Her cardigan slipped down her shoulder slightly. "Let me get that," I said, stepping forward. I reached over her head. I didn't even have to stretch. I grabbed the mug and set it on the counter. She turned around. We were close. Too close for neighbors. Definitely too close for a stranger who just walked in from the rain. She looked up at me. Her eyes traced the tattoos on my forearm, then moved up to my face. She didn't look disgusted. She looked intrigued. "You've painted on yourself," she noted, a small smile playing on her lips. "Covering up scars?" I muttered, crossing my arms to hide them. "Most people don't like looking at them." "Most people are blind," she said softly. She poured the water. The steam curled up between us, smelling of chamomile and honey. She handed me the mug. "Sit," she ordered, pointing to the small round table in the corner. "You look like you're vibrating." I sat. The chair felt fragile under my weight. I wrapped my hands around the hot ceramic, letting the heat seep into my frozen fingers. Evelyn sat opposite me. She didn't sit across the room. She pulled her chair close. She rested her chin on her hand, studying me. "So," she said, 10 years, Lucas. Where did you go?" "West," I said. "Oil fields in Dakota, garages in Texas, bounced around." "And what were you looking for?" I looked into my tea. The dark water reflected my tired face. "Quiet mostly, didn't find it." "And you came back," she said. "I didn't plan to stop," I admitted. My truck just gave up. Maybe it knew something I didn't. Maybe, she murmured. She reached out across the table. Her fingers brushed my wrist, right over a tattoo of a compass I'd gotten in Austin. Her skin was soft, uncalloused. It felt like fire against my cold arm. "You were always such an angry boy," she whispered. "Is he still in there? The boy who used to kick my fence?" I looked up at her. "I don't know. I think he's just tired now." "Good," she smiled, and it was that playful, teasing smile I remembered from when I was 16. "Because I liked the boy, but I think I prefer the man." My breath hitched. I didn't know what to do with that. I was used to women who liked the danger, or women who wanted me to fix their cars. I wasn't used to a woman who looked at me like I was something precious. The wind howled outside, rattling the window pane. The lights in the kitchen flickered. Once, twice. "Storm's getting worse," I said, glancing at the ceiling. "Let it storm," she said, not looking away from me. "We're warm in here." She stood up. "You're shivering, Lucas. That shirt is soaked." She walked to the laundry room off the kitchen. I heard a dryer door open. She came back holding a thick white towel and a heavy flannel shirt. "It was my husband's," she said, handing them to me. "He was a big man, but maybe not as broad as you. It should fit." I took the shirt. It smelled like cedar and lavender detergent. "Evelyn, I can't take your husband's clothes." "He's been gone 5 years, Lucas," she said gently. "Clothes are meant to be worn. Go change in the bathroom. I won't have you freezing to death in my kitchen." She shooed me away with her hand. "Go. And when you come back, you're going to tell me why you really came home." I walked into the small bathroom and shut the door. I looked at myself in the mirror. I looked rough, exhausted, and wary. But for the first time in 10 years, the eyes staring back at me didn't look lonely. I pulled the wet t-shirt off and dried my skin. I put on the flannel shirt. It was warm. It felt like, well, it felt like being cared for. I buttoned it up and took a deep breath. I wasn't the bad boy next door tonight. I was just Lucas. And she was waiting for me. The first candle burned down to a puddle of wax. I lit a second one, placing it on the hearth. The fire in the grate was dying down to glowing embers, casting deep, dancing shadows across the room. Evelyn yawned. She tried to hide it behind her hand, but her eyes were heavy. The adrenaline of the storm and my arrival was fading, leaving her exhausted. "You should sleep," I said softly. She looked at the dark hallway leading to the bedrooms. The house was freezing now without the furnace running. "It's cold upstairs," she whispered, wrapping her arms tighter around her knees. "And quiet." "Then don't go upstairs," I said. I stood up. I walked to the linen closet in the hallway. I remembered where it was from the time I helped her fix a leak in the ceiling when I was 17. I grabbed 2 heavy quilts and a couple of pillows. I walked back. "We stay here, by the fire." I spread the quilts out on the thick rug. I threw the pillows down. It wasn't a bed, but it was warm and it was in the light. Evelyn watched me. She looked at the makeshift camp on the floor, then up at me. "You're staying right there?" she asked, pointing to the spot next to her. "I'm staying right here," I confirmed. "I'll keep the fire going. If the storm gets worse, I'll be awake." She hesitated for a second. The propriety of the neighbor lady and the boy next door warring with the reality of the situation. The reality won. She crawled onto the quilt. She lay down on her side, facing the fire, pulling the edge of the blanket up to her chin. I sat down next to her, leaning my back against the sofa, stretching my legs out. I wasn't going to sleep. I was on watch. "Lucas," she murmured, her eyes half closed. "Yeah? You said you were looking for quiet." she said sleepily. Did you find it? I listened. The wind was still howling outside. The thunder was still rolling in the distance. But inside, hearing her steady breathing, feeling the warmth of her near me, the noise in my head was gone. Yeah, I whispered. I think I found it. She smiled, a small, contented curve of her lips. She reached out a hand from under the blanket. She didn't grab my hand. She just rested her fingers on my knee. An anchor. Good night, Lucas, she breathed. Good night, Evelyn. I watched her fall asleep. It didn't take long. Her breathing evened out. Her grip on my knee relaxed, but she didn't pull away. I sat there for hours. I fed the fire log by log. I watched the shadows play on her face. I looked at the woman who had shown kindness to a kid everyone else called a delinquent. Around 3 a.m., the cold really set in. Evelyn shivered in her sleep. She made a small, distressed sound and curled tighter into a ball. I didn't think about it. I just moved. I slid down from my seated position until I was lying next to her. I pulled the quilt up higher over her shoulder. Then, careful not to wake her, I wrapped my arm around her waist and pulled her back against my chest. She didn't wake up. She sighed, a long, releasing sound, and melted backward into the warmth. She fit perfectly against me. I froze for a second, waiting for her to push me away. But she didn't. She grabbed my arm, the arm covered in tattoos, and held it tight against her stomach. I buried my face in her hair. It smelled of vanilla and sleep. I realized then that I wasn't just passing through. I wasn't going to fix my truck and leave in the morning. I was going to stay. I was going to fix her fence. I was going to chop her firewood. And I was going to make sure she was never scared of the dark again. I closed my eyes, listening to the storm rage outside, holding the only good thing I'd ever found in this town. And finally, I slept too.